Jesus says a lot of really wise and important things. And I think with today's gospel, I need to take a letter out of Jesus' own book. Jesus said, "Who set me to be a judge and arbiter over you?" Amen. So I think you all can read the gospel on your own, and I'm going to go sit right back down, and no, I can't do that. So I do think there is good wisdom in what Jesus said from the outset of this gospel about greed. I am not going to talk about any of your individual bank accounts. You can all take a big sigh of relief. I am going to talk about the culture and the world that we all come from. We all were born and raised in a culture of greed. Now, you may have individual families, and you may have gone to church your whole life, and in that, they may have taught you the good values of generosity and giving, and that's a very good thing. But if you, and so actually I want to edit what I said, many of us, if you were born and raised and grew up in America, that actually isn't all of you, but if you were born and raised and grew up in America, you were born and raised in a culture of greed. American culture always wants more. More, more, more. It never quite seems to be enough, and if we look on the global stage, it gets really uncomfortable, because America, we have a lot of money. We got a lot of it, and the rest of the world really doesn't have as much as us. Europe has some, but when you talk about Africa, when you talk about Asia, when you talk about other parts of the world, we have a lot of money, and the rest of the world doesn't have a ton. And yet, it doesn't seem to ever really quite satisfy our cultural urge for more. Yesterday, I was reading an article by the Associated Press, and in that they talked about that 30 years ago, so 1995, think about what life was like for you in 1995. I hate to admit to you, I was 7. I know many of you were not 7, and I look like I'm 65, but I was 7. And in 1995, the AP claimed, based on evidence, but that there were a little over 1 million millionaires. So in 1995, there was about 1 million millionaires. And think about it in 1995. Now, I was 7, so some of this is a little shaded by that, but think about yourself. When I was 7, a millionaire had a lot of money. Millionaires had everything. If you had $1 million, you were set. You didn't need to work anymore. You didn't need to do anything anymore. You were done. And 30 years ago, I would never, ever, ever expect to meet a millionaire. Never. That was beyond my life experience. Today, 30 years later, today the AP says that there are around 27 or 28 million millionaires, people who have a net worth of $1 million in America right now. That's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 Americans has a net worth. That doesn't mean they have $1 million in their bank account. I understand that. But they have a net worth of $1 million. Now, you would think that with all those more millionaires, and some of that is inflation, I do understand that, but you would think with how, at least I grew up thinking of $1 million, once you had $1 million, you're set. We gotta have 1 in 10 people are set. And yet, what I find is, and what the AP article was talking about, is that the goalpost has just moved. What was $1 million 30 years ago is now worth about $2 million, right? And I don't remember the statistic, so I didn't want to say it, but it's coming up. and more millionaires, today's millionaires, today who have a net worth of $1 million, actually live with debt. Which I found that shocking. Because I thought, well, if you got $1 million, you have to be debt-free, right? No. More and more, we have more millionaires, and more of those millionaires live with debt. Remember the beginning of the sermon. I'm not talking about any of your bank accounts. I'm talking about culture. That in the culture we live in, we want more and more. The goalpost of what is enough and what is going to satisfy and what is going to be sufficient keeps moving further and further. We never quite get there. We get there for maybe a moment, but then once we get there, we recognize, oh, I have the house in California of all places, but does it have a pool yet? Or I have the car, I have the BMW. I don't. But some people, I have the BMW, but is it a Porsche? And we laugh, and that's true, I laugh. They're jokes. They're meant to make you laugh. You didn't do anything wrong. But the point I'm trying to make is that being raised and grown up in a culture of greed leaves us all with this deep-seated insecurity. And that deep-seated insecurity that lives in most of us is this belief that if I have more, I will finally be okay. It's the deep-seated belief that my value and worth, whether I have made it in life and whether I've measured up, depends on not just how much stuff I have, but is the stuff I have the stuff that other people wish they had. Right? It's that way in which mine, but our collective anxiety about I can't quite be satisfied, I can't quite put my feet up, I can't quite rest, because there's always this little niggly part of the back of my brain that's asking, but is it enough? Don't you need a little bit more? Wouldn't that little bit more make my life that much better? And that deep-seated anxiety, insecurity wasn't something you were born with, wasn't something you adopted. It just comes from a culture that always thinks that more is better, and to gather more and to amass more and seeking more is what will make it all good. And Jesus confronts that anxiety head on in today's parable, in today's gospel reading. I think about that man who finally says to his soul, "Soul, finally I can rest and be happy, be merry, because finally I think I have enough." But I've got to wonder, if the man didn't die that night, if you had given him 6 more months, would it just been, well, maybe a little bit more would be nice. Maybe I could do just a little bit more to really relax. And I think that would be some of our story. And Jesus confronts it right head on with something quite morbid. All of our readings today were a little morbid, but Jesus goes right there and reminds us that you will die. One day you will die, and all the things you have, whose will they be? In essence, they're not going to be yours anymore. They're going to go somewhere and to someone else. Now, it's a little intense and it's a little in your face, and I think if some of us were sitting there, we'd probably be a little offended at Jesus. Some of you may be a little offended as I say it to you. It was uncomfortable for me to say it too. But it's there. And it's a reminder to us that the impermanence of your life, the impermanence to all the stuff, means that the stuff can't be your salvation, your contentment, your peace. If the stuff is your peace, is where you get your sense of, I can finally be at ease, then it will always be slipping away. That can never be where we find true rest. As the parable says, true rest is found in God. We'll talk about that in a second. But in doing that in confronting me and you with our collective mortality and the reality that the stuff itself is constantly decaying and falling away and being consumed, disappearing, recognizing that stuff and having more of it and having the better stuff can't be where we find our peace and our ease and our rest, actually offers you some freedom. It liberates you. It gives you a chance to step out of the rat race, out of the constantly chasing of more, and instead to find contentment and peace now. Rather than seeking rest and peace and that easiness in some future place, it invites you to find where can you find that peace and rest now. And that kind of freedom isn't freedom to do whatever you want. It isn't freedom to just acquire more stuff, because that just keeps you in the rat race and the circle. But that freedom is the freedom to finally, truly, altruistically give the stuff away. To offer it in generosity to those who have absolutely no means to climb the ladder, who don't have the job or the career or the path forward, maybe even to give it away to those other countries and locales and places that don't have the financial security and wherewithal that this country has. It is the true freedom to find and discover that real contentment and peace and ease for our souls comes not from the stuff, but in giving and serving our neighbors. In the act of caring for, loving our neighbor as ourselves, we might finally be able to say to our soul, "Soul, take ease, be merry, be content, because you have cared and loved for another."